Handu stared at the metal ceiling of his prison cell. The dim purple lights of the draconian ship cast strange shadows around him. His wrists hurt from the tight metal bands, but he didn't show any pain. 3 days had passed since the draconians had captured his trading ship. "Get up, human," a rough voice called from outside his cell. "Commander Rin wants to see you." Han stood up slowly, his muscles stiff from sitting on the hard floor. He was tall for a human, but still shorter than the average draconian. At 42 years old, his black hair had touches of gray at the temples. His face showed no fear as 2 guards entered his cell. The guards were surprised when Han got up without any trouble. Most prisoners could barely move after 3 days in the holding cells. But Han had spent his time doing quiet exercises when no one was watching. Old habits from his Special Forces days died hard. The halls of the draconian warship were wide and tall, built for creatures bigger than humans. The metal floors rang with each step of the guards' heavy boots. Han walked between them, counting turns and remembering the path. Left, right, straight ahead for 50 meters, then right again. His military training kicked in automatically. Commander Rin's office was huge, with windows showing the stars outside. The commander sat behind a desk made of dark metal. Like all draconians, she had scales instead of skin, but hers were deeper purple than most. Her eyes glowed with a strange yellow light. "So this is the human trader we caught near the border zone?" Rin asked, looking at a screen in front of her. Handu, captain of the merchant ship Morning Star, carrying farm equipment and medical supplies. She looked up at Han. "Or so your papers say." Han kept his face blank. "The papers are correct, Commander. I'm just a trader." Rin laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. A trader who knows how to hide his ship's energy signature. A trader who almost escaped our fastest patrol ships. "I don't think so." She stood up and walked around her desk. "Your ship had special panels that block scanners. Your engines were military grade. Very interesting for just a trader." Han stayed quiet. He knew anything he said could be used against him. "We found something else interesting," Rin continued. She pressed a button on her desk. A hologram appeared in the air between them. It showed Han's DNA scan. "Your bones show signs of high-gravity training. Your muscles have marks of military enhancement. You're no ordinary trader, Handu." The guards shifted nervously behind Han. They had been treating him like a normal prisoner. Now they realized he might be more dangerous than they thought. "What do you want from me?" Han asked simply. Rin smiled, showing sharp teeth. "The truth would be nice, but we have other ways to get that." She walked closer to Han. "You see, we Draconians have a special place for spies and liars. We call it the Dragon's Den." Han kept his breathing steady, but his mind was racing. He had heard stories about the Dragon's Den. It was supposed to be a fighting pit where Draconians sent their worst criminals. Most didn't survive. "You will fight our champion," Rin announced. "If you win, you go free. If you lose," she let the sentence hang in the air. "And if I refuse?" Han asked. Rin's smile grew wider. "We found your ship's log. We know you stopped at the human colony on New Hope. Such a peaceful place. It would be sad if something happened to it." Han's face tightened for just a second. He had friends on New Hope, good people who had helped him many times. "I accept," he said quietly. "Excellent." Rin clapped her hands once. "Take him to the holding cells near the den. The fight will be tomorrow." She turned back to her desk, already losing interest in Han. "Oh, and Han, try to last at least 5 minutes. I have credits bet on this fight." As the guards led him away, Han kept his face calm. Inside, though, his mind was already planning. The Draconians thought they were sending him to his death. They didn't know that long before he became a traitor, he had been one of Earth's deadliest warriors. They were about to learn that sometimes the prey is really the predator in disguise. The new cell was bigger than the last one, but Han wasn't thinking about that. He sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes closed. The sound of heavy footsteps made him open one eye. A young draconian guard stood outside his cell, looking nervous. "I brought you food," the guard said, sliding a tray through the small opening. His voice was softer than most draconians. "I'm Jin." Han nodded. "Thank you, Jin." He noticed the guard's scales were lighter purple, a sign of youth among draconians. Jin looked around to make sure no one else was near. "You're really going to fight Lady Sun tomorrow?" "Do I have a choice?" Han asked, picking up what looked like a bowl of soup from the tray. "No one has ever survived more than 10 minutes against her," Jin said quietly. "She's killed 312 opponents. Some lasted only seconds." He paused. "But you're different, aren't you? I saw how you walk. Like my combat trainer." Han sipped the soup slowly. It tasted better than he expected. "Tell me about Lady Sun." Jin's eyes lit up, like he'd been waiting for someone to ask. "She's the greatest warrior in the Empire, 2.5 meters tall. Her scales are white. That's very rare. She has biological armor implants and enhanced strength." He lowered his voice. "They say she once killed a raging war beast with her bare hands." Han listened carefully, storing away every detail. "How does she fight?" "She's fast. Faster than anyone her size should be. And she likes to end fights quickly." Jin shuddered, usually by breaking her opponent's spine. "Interesting." Han set down the empty bowl. "And where do these fights happen?" Jin pointed downward. "The Dragon's Den is below us. It's an old lava chamber from when this asteroid base was a volcano. The walls are still hot." He looked at Han with curiosity. "Aren't you scared?" Han smiled slightly. "Fear doesn't help you survive, Jin. Thinking does." A loud buzzer made Jin jump. "That's the shift change. I have to go." He hesitated. "Good luck tomorrow. Try to die quickly. It's better that way." After Jin left, Han closed his eyes again. In his mind, he went through old lessons from his training days. He remembered his grandfather's voice. Size can be a weakness. The bigger they are, the more energy they use. Let them tire themselves out. Hours passed. Han dozed lightly, saving his energy. Finally, heavy footsteps approached again. A deep voice boomed. "Time to go, human." 4 guards stood outside his cell. They all looked tense, holding their weapons ready. They had obviously been warned about him. Han stood up smoothly, making no sudden moves. They led him down several levels. The air got warmer with each flight of stairs. Soon, Han could hear a low rumble of voices, a crowd waiting for blood. The entrance to the Dragon's Den was a huge metal door. As it opened, hot air rushed out. Han got his first look at the arena. It was massive, at least 50 meters across. The walls were rough black rock, glowing red in places from the heat below. Hundreds of draconians sat in seats carved into the rock walls. They all fell quiet when they saw him. Commander Rin's voice boomed from somewhere above. "Today we have a special treat. A human spy caught in our territory will face our champion." The crowd roared. "In the tradition of our ancestors, he will either prove his worth or die trying." Han looked around calmly. The arena floor was scattered with weapons. Swords, spears, and things he didn't recognize. A clever test. Your choice of weapon told them a lot about you. And now, our undefeated champion, Lady Sun. The crowd went wild as a door on the opposite side opened. Han's first thought was that Jin had been wrong. Lady Sun wasn't 2.5 meters tall. She was closer to 3. Her white scales gleamed in the red light. Metal plates were visible under her scales, the biological armor Jin had mentioned. Her eyes were pure black, with no pupils. She grabbed a massive sword from the ground with one hand, swinging it like it weighed nothing. The crowd cheered louder. Han didn't move toward any of the weapons. Instead, he rolled his shoulders and settled into a relaxed stance. Lady Sun tilted her head, surprised. "No weapon, human." Her voice was surprisingly soft. Do you wish to die so badly? Han smiled. I already have my weapons. He raised his empty hands. They're all I need. The crowd went silent. Even Lady Sun seemed shocked by his confidence. Commander Rin's voice cut through the silence. Begin. Lady Sun moved first. Her huge sword cut through the air where Han had been standing a split second before. The crowd gasped. No one had ever dodged her opening strike. Han rolled to the side, his movements smooth and controlled. The hot ground burned through his thin prison clothes, but he ignored the pain. Lady Sun turned to face him, her black eyes narrowing. You're quick, little human, she said. Her voice stayed soft, but now it had an edge to it. But you can't dodge forever. She was right. The arena's heat was already making Han sweat. Each breath of hot air burned his lungs. But he remembered his training. Let the enemy talk. Every word they speak is energy they waste. Lady Sun attacked again, her sword moving in a blur. Han watched her feet, not the sword. His old trainer had taught him that trick. The weapon lies. The feet tell the truth about where an attack will come from. This time, instead of dodging completely, Han stepped into the attack. Lady Sun's eyes widened in surprise as he moved closer to her. The sword passed over his head as he ducked, and now he was inside her reach. Han struck 3 quick hits to her side, right where the scales met the metal armor plates. Lady Sun growled, more in surprise than pain. She tried to step back, but Han followed, staying too close for her to use the sword effectively. In the crowd, Commander Rin leaned forward in her seat. This wasn't going as she had expected. The human wasn't just surviving, he was fighting back. Lady Sun threw her sword aside. It was useless at this range. She swung her massive arm at Han, trying to grab him. But he wasn't there anymore. He had rolled between her legs, coming up behind her. Before she could turn, Han struck the back of her knee, hard. Lady Sun stumbled for the first time in her fighting career. The crowd went silent. First rule of fighting bigger opponents, Han fought, remembering his training. Take away their balance. Lady Sun caught herself before falling. She spun around faster than seemed possible for someone her size. Her tail, which Han hadn't considered, whipped through the air toward him. This time, the hit connected. Han flew across the arena, rolling several times before stopping near the wall. The hot rock burned his back, but he pushed the pain away. He got up immediately. The crowd muttered in surprise. Most fighters stayed down after taking the hit from Lady Sun. But Han stood tall, his stance still calm and ready. Lady Sun touched the spot where Han had hit her knee. No one had ever managed to hurt her there before. She looked at the human with new interest. You are well trained, she said. Who taught you to fight? Han took slow, careful breaths. The air was getting hotter. My grandfather started my training. The Earth Special Forces finished it. In the crowd, Commander Rin's eyes widened. Earth Special Forces were legendary and feared. Now she understood why this human moved the way he did. Lady Sun nodded slowly. I have heard of your special forces. They say one of them can fight 10 normal warriors. She smiled, showing sharp teeth. But I am not a normal warrior. She charged forward, her steps shaking the arena floor. Instead of attacking, Han stood his ground. At the last second, he moved, not away from her, but toward her again. Lady Sun had expected him to dodge. Instead, Han slid past her charge and struck upward, his fist hitting exactly where her jaw met her neck. It was a killing blow against a human. Against a draconian, it was merely stunning. Lady Sun staggered, shaking her head. The crowd was completely silent now. No one had ever seen their champion take a hit like that. Han backed away, keeping his guard up. He was breathing harder now. The heat was getting to him, and Lady Sun was still mostly fresh. He had to end this fight soon. Second rule, he remembered his grandfather saying, when fighting for your life, there are no rules. Lady Sun recovered and faced him again. But now there was respect in her black eyes. This wasn't going to be a quick execution. This was going to be a real fight. "Shall we continue?" Han asked quietly. Lady Sun's answer was a roar that shook the arena walls. The heat in the arena was getting worse. Sweat poured down Han's face as he circled away from Lady Sun's attacks. His prison clothes were soaked, and his feet were burning from the hot ground. But he didn't let his pain show. Lady Sun had changed her fighting style. She no longer tried to grab Han or use big swinging attacks. Now she moved more carefully, trying to trap him against the hot walls. "You're tired, human," she said, watching him closely. "The heat is killing you slowly. Soon you won't be able to dodge." She was right. Han could feel his reactions getting slower. Each breath of the hot air hurt his lungs more. But he smiled slightly, remembering something else his grandfather had taught him. When an enemy thinks they know your weakness, they stop looking for your strength. Lady Sun charged again, but this time Han didn't move. Instead, he dropped and rolled forward, coming up right in front of her. His hand struck 6 points on her leg in quick succession. Pressure points that worked on any living being, even draconians. Lady Sun's leg buckled. She caught herself against the wall, her black eyes wide with shock. The crowd gasped. Their unbeatable champion was stumbling again. "What? What did you do?" she asked, trying to move her leg. "Nerve clusters," Han said quietly. "Even draconians have them. Your bones and scales are strong, but the nerves underneath." He didn't finish the sentence. In the audience, Commander Rin stood up. This human knew too much about draconian biology. He was more dangerous than she had thought. Lady Sun's leg was working again, but now she looked at Han differently. There was caution in her eyes, and something else, curiosity. "You could have struck killing points," she said. "Why didn't you?" "I'm not here to kill," Han answered. "I'm just trying to survive." The answer seemed to confuse Lady Sun. In all her fights, every opponent had tried to kill her. This was new. But she couldn't show weakness. With a roar, she launched a series of quick strikes. Her claws slashed through the air, barely missing Han each time. He ducked and weaved, but she could see he was getting slower. Finally, one of her strikes caught him. Her claws ripped across his chest, leaving 3 long cuts. Han stumbled back, blood staining what was left of his shirt. The crowd cheered. First blood had been drawn. Usually, this was the beginning of the end. But Han didn't fall. He straightened up, ignoring the pain. His eyes stayed focused, his breathing controlled. These wounds weren't enough to stop someone who had survived Special Forces training. Lady Sun paused. "You're bleeding badly. Surrender, and I will make your death quick." Han shook his head. "Can't do that. Too many people counting on me." He thought about the colony on New Hope, about the families and children there. Something in his voice made Lady Sun tilt her head. "You fight for others, not for glory or survival." "Sometimes," Han said, settling back into his fighting stance, "the biggest battles are fought for the smallest reasons." Lady Sun was quiet for a moment. In all her years of fighting, no one had ever said anything like that. Her opponents fought for money, fame, or revenge. This was different. The moment of quiet ended when Commander Rin's voice boomed through the arena. "Finish him, Lady Sun. Stop playing with your food." Lady Sun's face hardened again. She was the champion. She had a duty. With a growl, she launched her most devastating attack, a combination of strikes that had never failed to kill. But Han had been waiting for this. Despite his wounds, despite the heat, he moved like water between her strikes. His grandfather's voice echoed in his mind. Let their strength become their weakness. As Lady Sun committed fully to her attack, Han saw his chance. Time seemed to slow down as he moved into the perfect position. What happened next would be talked about in the Dragon's Den for years to come. Han moved like lightning. As Lady Sun's attack came at him, he didn't try to block or dodge. Instead, he stepped into the strike, turning his body at the last possible second. Using Lady Sun's own momentum, he grabbed her arm and pulled. The crowd watched in disbelief as their 3-meter-tall champion flew through the air. Lady Sun crashed into the hot ground with a sound like thunder. The arena shook from the impact. For the first time in her fighting career, Lady Sun was on her back. She tried to get up, but Han was already moving. His hand struck more pressure points on her arms and legs, leaving them temporarily useless. Impossible. Commander Rin shouted from her viewing box. No human can throw a draconian. But Han had done it. Using an ancient earth fighting technique, he had turned Lady Sun's strength against her. His grandfather had taught him this move when he was just 10 years old. Size doesn't matter, his grandfather had said. The bigger they are, the harder they fall, if you know how to make them fall. Lady Sun lay on the ground, her black eyes wide with shock. She couldn't move her limbs. The mighty champion of the Dragon's Den was helpless. Han stood over her, breathing hard. Blood still dripped from his chest wounds, but his eyes were clear and focused. The crowd waited for him to finish her. That's what always happened in the den. The winner killed the loser. Instead, Han knelt beside Lady Sun. His hands moved quickly, striking different points on her body. Suddenly, she could feel her arms and legs again. "Why?" she asked as she sat up. "Why did you give me back control?" "Because this isn't about killing," Han said quietly. It never was. The crowd was silent. No one had ever seen anything like this in the Dragon's Den. A winner who refused to kill. Commander Rin's voice boomed through the arena. "Finish the fight. One must die. Those are the rules." Han looked up at the commander's box, then changed the rules. His words echoed through the silent arena. The Draconians looked at each other in confusion. Change the rules. The rules had existed for thousands of years. Lady Sun stood up slowly. She looked at Han with new understanding. "You never wanted to fight, did you?" "No," Han said. "I just wanted to trade with your people. To build bridges, not break them." Commander Rin was furious. "Guards! Kill them both." But before the guards could move, Lady Sun stepped forward. Her voice rang out across the arena. "I invoke the right of champion's choice." The crowd gasped. The right of champion's choice was an ancient law. Even older than the Dragon's Den itself, it gave a champion the right to spare a worthy opponent. "This human has fought with honor," Lady Sun continued. "He could have killed me, but chose mercy instead. He has proven himself worthy." Commander Rin's face was dark with anger, but she couldn't argue. The law was clear. Even she had to respect the right of champion's choice. Han looked at Lady Sun with surprise. She gave him a small nod. "You have taught me something today, human. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when not to use your strength." The crowd was quiet for a moment. Then, from somewhere in the upper seats, someone started clapping. More joined in. Soon, the whole arena was filled with the sound. Jin, the young guard, was cheering loudest of all. He had just watched the impossible happen. A human had defeated Lady Sun, and then changed the rules of the den itself. Han's wounds still hurt, and he was tired from the fight and the heat. But he stood tall as Lady Sun raised his hand in victory. "The Dragon's Den has a new tradition today," she announced. "From now on, mercy will be honored as much as strength." The cheering grew louder. Even some of the guards were clapping now. Commander Rin sat in her box, her face unreadable. Han smiled slightly. His grandfather had taught him one last lesson. Sometimes, the best way to defeat an enemy is to make them your friend. Looking at Lady Sun's respectful nod and the cheering crowd, he knew he had done just that. The medical bay of the Draconian base was much cooler than the arena. Han sat on an examination table while a Draconian doctor treated his chest wounds. The cuts from Lady Sun's claws were deep, but not life-threatening. "You are lucky," the doctor said, applying a healing gel to the cuts. "Lady Sun's claws usually cut much deeper." "She wasn't trying to kill me," Han replied. Not really. She was testing me. The door opened, and Lady Sun herself walked in. She had changed out of her arena armor into simpler clothes. Without the armor, she looked less frightening, though still impressive. The human is right, she said to the doctor. I sensed something different about him from the start. She turned to Han. You could have killed me at least 3 times during our fight. Han nodded slowly. And you could have crushed me in the first minute if you had really wanted to. The doctor looked between them, confused. 2 warriors who had just tried to kill each other were now talking like old friends. Lady Sun sat down on a nearby chair, which creaked under her weight. Commander Rin is not happy. She lost many credits betting on your death. Is that going to be a problem? Han asked, wincing as the doctor bandaged his chest. No. The right of champion's choice is sacred law. Even Rin cannot break it. Lady Sun's black eyes studied Han carefully, but she wants to know why a special forces warrior was pretending to be a simple trader. Han was quiet for a moment. The doctor finished the bandages and left them alone. I really am a traitor now, Han said finally. After the war, many of us tried to find peaceful work. Some became farmers. Others joined the space police. I chose trading because I wanted to build connections between worlds. But you kept your military ship, Lady Sun pointed out. The galaxy can be dangerous. Pirates, raiders. I needed to protect my crew. Han looked at her directly. And sometimes, old habits save your life. Lady Sun nodded, like knowing exactly where to strike a draconian's pressure points. That was actually from my grandfather. He studied all known species, learning their weaknesses and strengths. But he taught me to use that knowledge for defense, never attack. A comfortable silence fell between them. Outside the medical bay window, they could see stars and the curve of the asteroid base. Things will change here, Lady Sun said suddenly. Your mercy, it has made many draconians think, including me. Change can be good, Han replied. Commander Rin wants you to leave as soon as your wounds heal. She will return your ship and crew. Lady Sun stood up. But I have a different idea. Han raised an eyebrow. Oh, stay. Teach our warriors your ways. Show them that strength isn't just about killing. She smiled slightly. Besides, you still owe me a rematch. Before Han could answer, Yum Jin burst into the medical bay. He was out of breath, like he had run all the way there. The council, he gasped. They want to see both of you. Now. Lady Sun's eyes widened. The council was the highest authority in the Draconian Empire. They rarely got involved in arena matters. What do they want? Han asked. They saw the fight. Everyone did. It was broadcast across the empire. Jin was still catching his breath. They say it could change everything. The way we deal with other species, the way we think about strength. Han stood up carefully, testing his bandaged chest. Well, we shouldn't keep them waiting. As they walked to the council chamber, Han thought about how strange life was. He had come here as a prisoner, expected to die. Now he might help change an empire. My grandfather would love this, he said quietly. Lady Sun looked at him curiously. Why? He always said the best victories are the ones where everyone wins. Looking at the respect in Lady Sun's eyes and Jin's excited face, Han knew his grandfather would be proud. The council chamber was the largest room Han had seen on the base. 7 elderly draconians sat at a high table, their scales faded with age. Their eyes, though, were sharp and alert as they watched Han and Lady Sun enter. Commander Rin stood to one side, looking uncomfortable. Jin waited near the door, trying to make himself invisible but too curious to leave. So, said the head council member, his voice deep and thoughtful, this is the human who changed the dragon's den. His scales were almost white with age. Do you know why you are here? No, honored one, Han answered respectfully. His grandfather had taught him the proper ways to address draconian elders. The council member's eyes widened slightly at Han's use of the correct title. You know our customs well, human. My grandfather believed that understanding brings peace, Han said. He taught me about many species, including yours. The council members looked at each other. One of them, a female with gray scales, spoke next. Your grandfather was wise. We have watched the recording of your fight many times. You showed great skill and greater wisdom. Lady Sun stepped forward. Honored ones, this human has taught us something important. Our ways can change without becoming weak. Commander Rin couldn't stay quiet any longer. But our traditions should guide us, not trap us. The head council member cut her off. We have received messages from across the empire since the fight was broadcast. Many agree it is time for change. Han listened carefully. He could feel something important was about to happen. The female council member stood up. We have made a decision. The Dragon's Den will no longer be a place of death only. It will become a place of learning, where warriors can test their skills without killing. The other council members nodded in agreement. Commander Rin looked like she had swallowed something sour. And you, Han Du, the head council member continued, we offer you a choice. Han straightened up, ignoring the pain in his chest. What choice, honored one? You may leave, return to your trading. We will compensate you for your troubles. The old Draconian's eyes fixed on Han. Or you may stay, help us build something new. Teach our warriors what you know about fighting with wisdom instead of just strength. Lady Sun turned to look at Han. There was hope in her black eyes. Han thought about his life as a trader. It was a good life, but sometimes it felt empty, like he wasn't using all his skills, all his knowledge. What about my crew? He asked. My ship. They can stay too, if they wish, the female council member said. We need traders as much as teachers, perhaps more. Jin couldn't contain himself any longer. You'll stay, won't you? He blurted out. Then he remembered where he was and bowed quickly to the council. Sorry, honored ones. The head council member actually smiled. Young ones often speak truth that others fear to say. Han looked around the room. At Commander Rin, who needed to learn that change wasn't always bad. At Jin, who represented a new generation of Draconians. At Lady Sun, who had learned to see beyond combat to something greater. He remembered his grandfather's words. Life gives you moments when you can make a real difference. Don't waste them. I'll stay, Han said. But I have one condition. The council members looked surprised. No one made conditions to the council. What condition? The head council member asked, more curious than angry. The Dragon's Den needs 2 teachers, Han said. He turned to Lady Sun. Will you teach with me? Your strength and my technique together. Lady Sun's eyes widened. Then she smiled, the first real smile Han had seen from her. I would be honored. The council members talked quietly among themselves. Finally, the head council member spoke. It is decided then. The Dragon's Den will become a school of warriors, with 2 masters, 1 human, 1 Draconian. Jin cheered, then quickly covered his mouth. But this time, even Commander Rin couldn't hide a small smile. When do we start? Lady Sun asked. Han looked at his healing chest. Give me 2 days to recover. Then we'll show everyone what real strength looks like. The head council member nodded. A new chapter begins. May it bring wisdom with strength and peace with power. 2 days later, the Dragon's Den looked very different. The weapons were gone from the arena floor. The hot ground had been covered with training mats. Most importantly, the viewing seats were filled with young Draconian warriors, all waiting to learn. Han stood in the center of the arena with Lady Sun. His chest wounds were healing well, thanks to Draconian medicine. Jin sat in the front row, practically bouncing with excitement. They're nervous, Lady Sun said quietly, looking at the students. They've never been taught by a human before. They're not the only ones who are nervous, Han replied with a small smile. I've never taught Draconians before. Lady Sun put a hand on his shoulder. Then we will learn together. She turned to address the students, warriors of the Empire. Welcome to the new Dragon's Den. The students straightened up. Many of them had watched Han and Lady Sun's fight. Now they would learn from both fighters. Han stepped forward. Your old training taught you that strength is everything. That killing makes you powerful. He looked at each student. Today, you'll learn something different. Strength without wisdom is like a ship without a pilot, Lady Sun added. It goes nowhere useful. A young Draconian raised his hand. But how can a human teach us? You're so much smaller than us. Instead of answering, Han looked at Lady Sun. Would you help me demonstrate? Lady Sun smiled and moved to attack Han. But this time, she moved slowly enough for the students to see what happened. Han redirected her force, using her own strength to throw her, just like in their fight. The students gasped. Lady Sun got up, unhurt. Did you see? She asked. Size didn't matter. Technique and wisdom did. Combat isn't about who's bigger or stronger, Han explained. It's about understanding yourself, your opponent, and the situation. Another student raised her hand. But what if someone really wants to kill you? Then you defend yourself, Han said. But killing should be the last choice, not the first. There are better ways to win. Lady Sun nodded. In our fight, Han could have killed me several times. Instead, he chose to teach me. Now I'm stronger than ever, not because of better fighting, but because of better understanding. Jin, who couldn't stay quiet any longer, called out, Can we learn the pressure point technique? Han smiled. Eventually. But first, you need to learn the most important lesson. He walked to the edge of the arena and picked up a small ball. Catch, he said, throwing it to the nearest student. The young Draconian caught it easily. What's this for? Throw it back, Han said. But don't hurt me. The student looked confused. He held back his strength, tossing the ball gently. Han caught it. That, Han said, is your first lesson. You knew how to control your strength. You chose not to hurt me. That's wisdom. Lady Sun walked among the students. For too long, we thought control meant weakness, but true strength is knowing when and how to use your power. Throughout the morning, Han and Lady Sun taught basic moves. They showed how to redirect force, how to control strength, and most importantly, how to think before acting. Commander Rin watched from her viewing box. She had to admit, the students were learning fast. Maybe change wasn't so bad after all. By the end of the lesson, every student had learned to throw and be thrown safely. They were tired but excited. This was very different from their old combat training. Tomorrow, Han announced, we'll learn more. But remember today's lesson. True strength isn't about hurting others. It's about protecting yourself and those around you. As the students left, talking excitedly among themselves, Jin stayed behind. That was amazing, he said. But I have one question. What is it? Lady Sun asked. When do we learn the really cool moves? Jin asked hopefully. Han laughed. When you're ready. First, you need to understand why we fight, and why sometimes we choose not to. Lady Sun looked at Han with respect. You're a good teacher. We both are, Han replied. Together, we'll show them a better way. The Dragon's Den was changing. And with it, maybe the whole empire would change too. 1 year had passed since Han's fight in the Dragon's Den. The asteroid base looked very different now. Where there had once been only military ships, trading vessels from many worlds now docked freely. The halls that were once quiet now buzzed with visitors from across the galaxy. Han stood at a window, watching a human trading ship dock. His own ship, the Morning Star, sat nearby, recently returned from a successful trade run to New Hope Colony. But Han wasn't just a trader anymore. He was something more. Master Han. Jin's voice called from down the hall. The young guard had become Han's first real student, and now helped teach others. The graduation ceremony is about to start. Han turned from the window. The graduation ceremony was important. The first class of students was completing their training in the new Dragon's Den. The arena was packed with spectators. Not just draconians this time, but humans, centaurians, and other species. They had all come to see what the famous Dragon's Den had become. Lady Sun stood in the center of the arena. She looked different too. Her white scales now gleamed with pride instead of menace. The students stood in neat rows before her, including some non-draconians who had joined the training. 1 year ago, Lady Sun began, her voice carrying to every corner. This was a place of death. Now it is a place of life and learning. She looked at Han as he took his place beside her. And it all began with one human who showed us a better way. Commander Rin sat in her usual viewing box, but she wasn't alone. Members of the council were with her, along with representatives from other worlds. They had all come to see the results of this experiment. Each student here has learned more than just fighting, Han addressed the crowd. They have learned when not to fight, when to show mercy, when to turn an enemy into a friend. One by one, the students demonstrated what they had learned. Draconians fought alongside humans, showing control and precision instead of raw power. They demonstrated the pressure point techniques, using them to disable without harm. Most importantly, they showed how to end fights without hurting anyone. Jin's demonstration got the loudest cheers. He faced off against a centaurian twice his size, and neither fighter hurt the other. Instead, they showed how to turn combat into a dance of skill and respect. After the demonstrations, the head council member stood to speak. 1 year ago, we took a chance on change. Many thought we were wrong. He looked at Commander Rin, who nodded slightly. But look at what has grown from that choice. He gestured to the arena, where students of different species talked and laughed together. The Dragon's Den is no longer just a draconian place. It has become a symbol of something greater, a place where different peoples can learn from each other. Han felt Lady Sun's hand on his shoulder. Your grandfather would be proud, she said quietly. He would be proud of all of us, Han replied. We've built something new here. The ceremony ended with a surprise announcement from the council. The Dragon's Den would expand, opening smaller training centers on other worlds. The way of mercy and wisdom would spread. Later that evening, Han stood again at his favorite window. Lady Sun joined him, watching the stars. Did you ever think it would turn out like this? She asked. When they first threw you into the den? Han smiled. No, I was just trying to survive. He looked at her. But sometimes the best things happen when we're forced to face our fears. The old stories were wrong, Lady Sun said thoughtfully. They said humans were weak because they showed mercy. Now we know that mercy is its own kind of strength. Jin appeared, still excited from the ceremony. Master Han. Lady Sun. The new students are arriving tomorrow. 20 more worlds want to send warriors to train. Han looked out at the docked ships, at the busy halls full of different species working together. They threw me into the Dragon's Den thinking I was prey, he said quietly. Instead, they'd found a teacher. Lady Sun laughed. And I found a friend. And I found my calling, Jin added proudly. The three of them stood together, watching the stars. The Dragon's Den had changed forever. And with it, the galaxy was changing too. All because someone chose to show mercy instead of taking revenge. Sometimes the fiercest beasts are the ones who know when not to bite.